Okay, Perek chapter 5, number 3. When the Talmud Chacham drinks wine, the only reason why he drinks the wine is to douse the food in his intestines, meaning it's to help to wash the food down. It's part of the digestive process. It's not to drink wine for wine. If one becomes drunk, when one drinks wine, one drinks to a point where he becomes drunk. He's a sinner. It's something which is distasteful, or megune. It's something which is inappropriate. And ultimately, it causes him to lose his wisdom. Meaning, it affects the person, even if he sobers up, that he allows himself to go in the state of drunkenness, and he displays certain inappropriate persona, it causes him to lose his wisdom. It affects him. What about if he gets drunk in front of an ignorant person, not among his own peer group? He's desecrating God's name. Because this person, what he represents, if he gets drunk, it's a disgrace. He's disgraced because here he's supposed to represent perspective and clarity and integrity and quality. And when he becomes drunk, this representation is being desecrated. Therefore, it's a chil Hashem. It's disgracing God's name. One should not drink one. People have their nightcaps. You have, happy hour. You walk down Manhattan, you have signs out, happy hour. One should not drink wine in the early afternoon, unless it's a time that you eat. When you eat, the wine is to help the digestive process. Unless it's part of a meal, but just to drink, we're going to have a drink, it's inappropriate. What's the reason? Because one eats and drinks, it doesn't have the intoxicating effect. Because the food helps absorb, the body digests, absorbs it together with the food. One has to be careful, the wine you drink after you've eaten. After you've eaten, before you eat, it's like, because you're going to eat soon. So the food that you're going to eat will help absorb the alcohol. It should not have that negative effect. But if you're very eaten and then you want to drink wine afterwards, where it's not part of the digestive process, then the wine will affect you. And therefore, you're going into the area of what? Of becoming slightly unbalanced due to the alcohol. It's interesting. The Rambam writes that a person who's a Talmud Chacham, to what point does he have to study? You have to continue studying until you die. What does that mean? Because he says, because the moment you stop studying, you begin forgetting. So not being in the mode of studying, detaching himself causes you to forget. Because a person naturally forgets. So if a person becomes drunk, it's a time that you don't have clarity. So that's considered like a detachment from the process. A person, even if you're not studying verbally, but you can reflect, you can meditate, you can reflect on what you studied. But if the mind itself is affected where it causes a lack of clarity because due to the alcohol, so why this person detach himself from being able to study? The moment you create that detachment, you begin forgetting. Because he says if you drink, it causes you to what? To lose your wisdom, right? But Wednesday says, if you become drunk, drunk doesn't mean there's an expression, dead drunk. He's not dead drunk. Drunk means that he is not fully rational because of his drinking. So what about when you sleep? When you sleep, maybe also it causes you to forget your studying. The Rambam says the reason why you have to study till the last moment, till as long as you're alive, because the moment you stop studying causes forgetting, so that doesn't go to sleep. Right? When you sleep, you're not studying. Right? The answer, I think, is this. I mean, when you go do the bodily functions, you're not permitted to meditate in Torah because the location is not an appropriate location. The answer is because that's the halacha. The law is you're not permitted. So as long as you're playing within the system, it doesn't have that negative effect. You have to sleep. Sleeping is a necessity of life. What about a person that sleeps too much? You sleep at a time that you shouldn't be sleeping. You know, a person that arrives at work 3 hours late every day because he oversleeps. You understand? It may cost him his job. Because he should be at work at his desk being productive for 3 hours during those 3 hours that he wasn't there. So if you should be engaged, then there's a negative consequence. But if you need that sleep to go forward, because it's necessary for your health, for your function, then that's not called detaching yourself. That's not detaching yourself from the process of studying. You know, one time they used to say, the Gemara tells us that on Yom Tif, there's a mitzvah, you should rejoice on your holiday. And the Gemara says, how does one rejoice on the holiday? Ein simcha el b'basar v'yayin. You rejoice by having wine and meat. That's how you rejoice. So the Gemara asks, and how does a woman rejoice? Because for a woman to drink wine, it's inappropriate. The husband should buy her nice clothing. When a woman receives a beautiful, whether it's jewelry or a dress or part of attire, that gives her joy. That's how she rejoices on the holiday. It's this big tzivonim, like colored clothing. But wine for a woman is inappropriate. Today, unfortunately, women, they drink and they get tipsy. But at one time, it was seen as something ugly. A man gets drunk is one thing. But for a woman to be in a drunken state or not in a fully controlled state, at one time, it was seen as something very negative. Because a woman, being who she is, God forbid, if she's not on her watch, so to say, she's vulnerable. She's vulnerable to certain things. And therefore, it's inappropriate. A woman should never be in a position where she can be taken advantage of. And when she drinks, it's not appropriate. That on a Torah level, a person's a minor, his actions have no halachic value. Okay, so let's say you have a girl who's a minor. If a father marries her off, although she's a minor, the marriage is a Torah marriage. Because the girl is considered in her father's domain, and he marries her to a man, not that he engages with her sexually, but she's considered the wife of that person. What about if she becomes an orphan? And she could be actually, there could be a pedophile to take advantage of her, right? Rabbinically, the rabbis legislated that the mother and the brothers can marry off. It's a rabbinic marriage because the husband will watch her and supervise her. Nobody should actually defile her. So for the sake of protecting the young girl from being victimized by these predators out there, they marry her off to a husband, and the husband will watch over her, supervise it. Nobody should victimize her to that degree. In Morocco, I don't know if you're aware of this, we have a Moroccan on the Zoom, Mordechai. In Morocco, they would marry off girls when they were 12 years old, but the girl remained in a parent's home until she was 16 or 18. Why? Because when she was married, she would wear a ring, and among the Muslims, they would only take advantage of a woman if she was single. The moment they knew she was married, she was off limits to them. So they would marry her off as a young girl, 12 years old. So she was off limits to the male population. But if she was not off limits, if they could take advantage, they would take advantage of her. Although a man's wife is always permitted to him sexually. A person Talmud Chacham, he should behave and interact with a degree of sanctity. You shouldn't be involved with your wife like a rooster. A rooster is always involved with the hen. If physically he's up to it, once a week, Friday night. Okay? Now, let me explain you something. It's cited in many of the commentators that it's based on really the society you live in. Let's say you live in a society that unless you're able to satisfy your sexual desire due to the environment, and if you don't, it could really lead you to not good places, then the person should be involved with his wife more often. If you live in like a pristine Puritan society where people behave and the environment doesn't in any way create this attraction to this, once a week is enough. Although it's permitted more. But if you're in an environment where what you're exposed to touches you in a way that you have to satisfy that, so either you're satisfied in a permitted setting or, God forbid, to go somewhere else for it, then you engage with your wife more often for that reason. Lo tisaper betchilas halayla kshu saveh bitnu molei. You know, when a person is in bed with his wife and he speaks to her, and he, whatever it is, he says certain things which are actually intimate, it should be not at the beginning of the night. Because we said earlier, a person cohabits when he's full, it's not healthy. But if that conversation will arouse him and will come to that, he's doing the wrong thing for himself because it's not healthy. He says, therefore, you shouldn't do it when you're sated and your belly is full. Because we spoke about the most taxing act, which draws every part of the person, is the sexual act. So if the body is processing the food and the heart is being drawn upon, in terms of the digestive process, it's overtaxing the heart. It should be in the middle of the night where the food already is basically digested, and therefore you shouldn't act with levity with your wife. Meaning, of course, you have to say words before, in terms of words of intimacy, which touches the wife and the wife touches the husband. But to reach to a point of to say it in an inappropriate manner. You know, in Yiddish, there's a word called prust. You know, prust means coarse, to speak in a very coarse, earthy way. That's inappropriate. You know, there's language, there's what you talk about, how you talk about it. It should be more on the refined side. Should be an odom liishto, excuse me. Lo yinavelis piv b'divrei havoy. You shouldn't profane your mouth. Used to be a word, today you don't hear it any longer. You know, not long ago, 40 years ago, there was the word profanities. there was a word used, vulgar language, vulgarities. You tell me the last time you heard that with those words used in our vernacular. You ever hear a word profanity? He said a profanity. He said a person's a vulgar person, but speech that it's a vulgarity. When was the time you heard that? Okay. Even though it's between them, nobody else hears it. If it's vulgar, it should not, or profane, profanity shouldn't. King Solomon says that in the day of judgment, God will even say to you what you said with your wife at the intimate moment, whether it was appropriate or not appropriate. Even the light, innate conversation with the husband and wife when they're about to engage. If it's not appropriate, there'll be accountability for that. But who heard it? It's between the two of them. A Jew's behavior has to be appropriate. And if you say something which is out of line, which is inappropriate, unacceptable, you're held accountable for it. What about the husband and wife that intoxicated and they engage in sexual activity when they're both drunk, intoxicated, not appropriate? They shouldn't be in this like laid back or this melancholy. The person's depressed and they get together just to distract himself from the depression. It's not. By the way, it's very interesting. I mean, psychologically, the Talmud tells us, based on the verse, that when a woman has relations with a man, the act itself affects the woman psychologically, mentally, that the man is able to influence the woman. Once whoever the woman cohabits with, not talking about God forbid she's raped, she's consensual involvement, and she agrees, the man experiencing that relation with that male, he will have influence on her, and she's subject to his influence. That's number one. So, what about they're in a melancholy state? This touches upon the whole mental, emotional makeup of the person, this act, because it's such an intimate act. In a depressed state, they're both in it. It's unhealthy. It's unhealthy to engage in that with that mental state. It's not for the sake of distraction. No, you got to distract yourself.